Exit light into night. Take my hand. We're off to talking Bollocks land. Yes, we are indeed. Welcome, my fellow Bollockers. Good day. It is a Bollocast of the highest proportions. Today it is a writer's special. Yeah, another one. This is a very special one, actually. This is to mark the launch of a book from the 33 and a third series called The Black Album. As I'm sure you've already read, you've downloaded this, whatever. This is an interview with David Masciotra, who I actually met through email. Via DX, Dave Ferris, who wrote the 33 and a third Rain in Blood book. So a nice little bit of symmetry there, and you know how I like my symmetry. And yeah, that's where we're at. I'm going to give you all the details on how to get the book and everything later, although you can tweet them at 33 and a third. Basically, you need to go on to Amazon, anywhere like that, and just put in 33 and a third or Black Album 33 and a third, and you'll soon find it. This is a really interesting chat that David and I had a couple of weeks ago. Fascinating guy, and a published author, and very knowledgeable man on many subjects. It was just a really cool chat. Really enjoyed catching up with him. You will be able to find you can go to his website, David Masciotra. That's David and MASCIOTRA.com. I will give that out later, and he's also at Facebook on that same name. As I said, really cool guy, and we had a really nice chat. And there's no real need for much of an intro here, because this is what it's all about. It's a Black Album special. Whether you like it or not, you're going to hear some interesting stuff about the band. I meant whether you like it or not, as in the album or not. You're going to hear some interesting stuff here. David's really done his research, and done the interviews. So sit back, relax, and chill out with David and I talking about the Black Album, how it's recorded, where it's at now, and everything that went on around it. So enjoy. Hello, Dave. Hello, David.
Hi, how are you?
I am very well. How are you?
Great. Thank you for having me on your program.
Oh man, no, absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on, and apologies for the slight confusion there. I saw on your Skype profile that you were in Indiana, so I stupidly checked on a search engine what time it was in Indiana, and it said it was 11:20, and I thought, oh no, I've messed up the hours.
Oh no, I am in Indiana, but I'm very close to Chicago. I'm about furthest northwest that you can go in the state, so I'm in the central time zone.
Right, okay, cool. Right, okay. Well, so anyway, look, we finally made it. That's the main thing.
Yeah, and thank you for your patience with me. I'm sorry that I had to duck out at the last minute on Wednesday.
Oh no, not a problem, man. Not at all. I mean, this is a rare opportunity. I'm really excited to talk to you about this book. And just so you know, we are recording. We've already started. It's a podcast. You can swear. You can say whatever you like. There are no lawyers listening.
Okay, great.
So, in the spirit of true disclosure, Dave, for regular listeners, that would be DX Ferris, put us in touch with each other, I think your book came out. Was it 3 days ago?
Yes. 2 days ago. It was Thursday.
Right. Okay. And that is just titled Metallica.
Right. It's part of Bloomsbury's much valued and vaunted 33 and a third series.
Yes.
And for anyone unfamiliar, each book chronicles one record, and mine is on Metallica's self-titled record, better known in some circles as the Black Album.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, basically, this podcast is going to be a Black Album special, so we're going to dedicate it to this entire conversation that we're going to have, because obviously I think really, if to use the term game changer, I mean it's basically the dictionary definition of a game changing album, really.
Oh, absolutely. History making, groundbreaking record. It was when Metallica claimed and earned their status as royal ambassadors to the world for heavy and hard music. And it was really a cultural album, to use Bob Rock's expression. Bob Rock, who produced the record, told me when we talked that it was a cultural album, and I like that turn of phrase. Cultural album is one that not only impacts and influences its genre, but transcends the boundaries and borders of its particular genre to have some measurable influence and impact on all of music culture. And there's a significant and strong case to make that Metallica's self-titled record, the Black Album, did indeed accomplish just that.
I would agree entirely with that. I mean, I think it, as you said, it crosses musical cultures. I mean, I saw the band when they were playing Jules Holland's show over here, which is a live show with all musicians from different bands all playing their tunes and stuff. And
that's an excellent show. I get it here on a channel.
Oh, cool!
I enjoy watching it all the time.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, I mean, it is, and Metallica have been on there a few times. The last time they were on there, was for Lulu, but we'll skip over that. But before that, it was for Death Magnetic, and they obviously they played Enter Sandman, and you could see all of the musicians in all of the other bands, ranging from skiffle to funk to you name it. You could see them all singing along. It just covers everything, really.
Right, and that riff is hard and heavy, but it has a great sexual rhythm to it, which connects it to rock and roll's origins and rock and roll history. And yeah, it's probably the only heavy metal song, and some people would use this as a strike against it, that you could play at a wedding reception, and the women there would stay on the dance floor and keep moving. But that's how rock and roll started. I mean, Elvis Presley and Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis, it was about rebellion and revolt and defiance and buoyancy, but it was also about getting the girls to have a good time and partying and all of that. So, and of course, heavy metal springs out of rock and roll. So these connections are stronger than some people would like to imagine.
Did you find, when you were talking to the band, did you find that there was any of that kind of subtext in the back of their minds when they were putting the album together, or not?
Oh, yeah, there absolutely was, and that was what made it really interesting for me to converse with the members of the band, but also to write the book, is that it enabled me to write the book as a love letter to heavy metal, hard rock, and roll. They had just gotten off touring behind And Justice for All, and they had begun to believe that they had taken progressivism as far as they could take it, that they were beginning to reach a dead end. And James Hetfield, in my conversation with him, explained that as frontman, lead singer, cheerleader of the band, he felt this distance between his delivery of the music and the audience reception of the music, because he was spending all this time on stage trying to engage the crowd in 8-9 minute songs, and there was a disconnect there. So they made the deliberate decision to simplify, and by simplify, they didn't mean soften, and they didn't mean dull, they just meant simplify. So they started to look at some of their hard rock influences, like the Rolling Stones and AC/DC and Aerosmith, and some punk rock influences like the Ramones and the Misfits. So there was this lineage, this ancestry that they began to investigate and explore, and they started to find ingredients from all their different influences from the 70s and the 80s and find ways to drop them into this intoxicating hard rock heavy metal tonic. And of course, the entire world ends up getting drunk on it.
Yeah, and that's a very beautifully put. So do you think it was it signified a widening of the influences on their music, as in previous albums they'd very much channeled their metal influences, whereas they allowed their other wider influences to come into the songwriting when it came to the Black Album.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it, and it addresses this specious and unconvincing charge, slanderous charge that Metallica sold out with the Black Album. In the records prior to the release of the Black Album, they were very much making music in the heavy metal genre and style, a style, thrash metal, that they helped define and create.
Yeah.
But you can hear traces of that hard rock edge in some of the early work. I mean, a song like Seek and Destroy is a song that Metallica themselves referenced continually when they were making the Black Album. For Whom the Bell Tolls is another one. And it's not; those songs aren't that far removed from Led Zeppelin, AC/DC, Aerosmith, Deep Purple. But what they did is they really went back to their youth, their childhood, before the new wave of British heavy metal made them all fall in love and lose their minds in the best possible way. And they went back to the records and the bands that they loved as teenagers. And for James Hetfield, that was Aerosmith. He had a poster of Aerosmith on his wall in his childhood bedroom. For Lars Ulrich, that was Deep Purple. Deep Purple was his favorite band, and Made in Japan was his favorite record, that classic live Deep Purple record. For Kirk Hammett, it was Jimi Hendrix, and also Deep Purple and UFO. So they really did go back to their childhood and begin to reawaken, revitalize, resurrect what made them first fall in love with the beautiful rebellion and revolt of rock and roll and hard rock.
And do you think this was this a process that they just kind of they felt themselves? Was this a conversation they had with management? Was this a conscious, let's all go and listen to, that stuff that got us excited back in the day, and and then come and try and bring that energy to writing the next album? Were you able to find any of that out?
Yeah, well, as I said, they did begin to feel that the music was getting a little too complex. Yeah. And a little too far removed from the garage.
Yeah, no, I get that. I was just wondering whether it was specifically, it was within the band that these conversations were had, or whether it involved management as well, or both.
The way that I got the story, it was within the band, and the pivotal conversation took place at a Canadian stadium after they opened for Aerosmith. And they convened a meeting while Aerosmith was playing their set in what Lars Ulrich called the bowels of the stadium, and they could hear some of the Aerosmith performance drifting down into their little area, and they were strategizing on what approach they would take with the next record. And that's when they discussed the Rolling Stones and the Misfits and Led Zeppelin and all of those bands. And then when they enlisted Bob Rock's support, they already had demos recorded of the songs, the basic tracks. So there's some people who think, well, Bob Rock came along and he pushed them in that direction because he had produced Aerosmith and he produced Bon Jovi and Motley Crue. But they already had the demos recorded, so he just put his flavor on it and helped make it as powerful and big and bold as it could possibly be.
Yeah, it's funny because when you look back now and you think, and just the discussion we've had already about where the band were coming from, it really was just hand in glove. It was the perfect producer to pick for where they were at and what they wanted to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. They originally wanted to enlist him only as the engineer of the record. Uh, James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich still wanted to handle the production by themselves, but they liked the work that Rock did with Aerosmith, and they liked the work that Rock did with the Cult. Excellent band, fantastic. Uh, but Bob Rock, he had attended a live Metallica performance, and he thought that the live performance was so muscular, yet their studio sound, especially on the Justice record, suffered from infirmity. So Rock boldly, with a bit of arrogance, said, "I don't want to mix the record. I want to produce it."
Yeah.
And Lars Ulrich said that they were a little taken aback by Rock's boldness, but the more they thought about it, they thought that it was time to allow someone to challenge them, and that's exactly what happened because
Yeah.
Bob Rock liked Metallica, but he wasn't in awe of them. So he
Yeah.
had some critical distance.
Well, that was the first of many times that he was going to take them aback with his cockiness.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as you rightly said, basically he wasn't in the camp, was he? They'd worked with Flemming Rasmussen, and they developed a kind of a sort of Metallica camp as regards making albums, and the whole Mike Clink thing didn't work on Justice. So yeah, going into this, it really was a case of they really are going in and doing something different, because they've basically got a producer who is going to sit there and is going to say, "That's not good enough. Go away, do better."
Right, and there were some crucial moments in which he did that, and he provided the perspective of an outsider, which is always valuable in
Yeah.
any creative process. He told James Hetfield that he heard a better singer within him, waiting to be born, rather than just someone screaming in key. And Hetfield rose to the challenge, rose to the occasion. He got Hetfield to open up a little bit and start writing more personal lyrics,
Yeah.
rather than depending on depiction of fantasy or a complicated story.
Yeah.
Songs like "Ride the Lightning."
Yeah, or commenting on society, always, or
Right.
basically always taking that brilliant sort of critical lyrical ability that he has and sort of turning it inward instead of outward all the time.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you see this move, this transformation from the lyrics of "And Justice for All," which I find, to use the word you just used, brilliant and powerful and forceful, but is really like you could write those lyrics if you have Hetfield's talent and imagination after watching CNN or reading the New York Times.
Yeah.
But on the Black Album, James Hetfield's writing songs about the death of his mother, his romantic relationships, things like that. And he's managing to do it with the same acidic edge that he brought to earlier records, but it has that intimacy that makes it so unique and simultaneously profound.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. It is a noticeable difference. And but
And we were
also, sorry, go on.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We were
No.
talking about influences
Yeah,
earlier. It's interesting. Hetfield said in our conversation that he really turned to punk rock when he decided to start writing more personal lyrics, because he thought, you take a song like "Ride the Lightning," what is that about at its core? It's about fear, it's about anger, within the structure, under the umbrella of a story about an innocent, falsely accused man facing the electric chair. Well, why not just write a song about fear and anger, like punk rock lyricists do? Just express what you're feeling directly.
yeah,
And then Bob Rock told me that he got James Hetfield to listen to Beatles records and John Lennon solo records, because he thought that John Lennon would be a great influence on Hetfield, because Hetfield was always so precise in his lyricism, and he wanted Hetfield to see the power of subtlety. Sometimes less is more.
yeah.
And he thought that John Lennon was a master of that particular style. So perhaps an unlikely influence for a heavy metal songwriter, but John Lennon played an important part in the process.
Yeah, so basically a little more carrot and a little less stick. Do you see what I mean? It's like, you know, a little more subtlety and a little less aggression, if you like, but you can still make the point. Oh, there he goes. Maybe he did know what I meant. Oh, signal is horrendous. Aha.
Hi, Howard. I think we might have had some technical difficulties.
Yeah, I think we definitely did. Yeah, yeah. Don't worry, we're back online. So, well, actually, the question I asked just before we lost the connection was, so from a lyrical point of view, what Bob Rock seemed to be trying to encourage Hetfield to do was, well, basically, the phrase I used was a little more carrot and a little less stick.
Yeah.
A bit more subtlety and a little less kind of just brutal kind of anger.
Right. Did you? I'm not sure when we got cut off. Did you hear me talk about John Lennon?
I did. Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And Bob sort of bringing that into the equation for.
Yeah. Well, if you look at the song "Enter Sandman," which we just talked about earlier, originally the song is about crib death. And originally, Hetfield told the story with the precision that he had used as an instrument of blunt force on previous records. So instead of "Off to Never Never Land," for example, the lyric was "Destroy the Perfect Family." And it wasn't only Bob Rock, but it was Kirk Hammett and Lars who were disappointed with those lyrics because they thought that the song, as we were discussing earlier, had such a great soul groove in addition to this heaviness, and that's a Kirk Hammett phrase, soul groove, that these precise lyrics telling this complicated narrative almost undermined that musical effect. So Bob Rock was the one who had the job of relaying that message to Hetfield, because at the time they had a rule that criticism could only come through a mediator.
Wow!
So
right,
couldn't criticize Hetfield directly.
Right.
Hetfield,
so even back then, we had the beginnings of the communication issues, which were going to come to a head on Saint Anger, of course.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, it seems like it's an unhealthy way to work if you're a band trying to collaborate in a creative process that the drummer can't directly give feedback to the singer, or the singer can't give direct feedback to the bassist. You have to go through this messenger at all times. It worked on the Black Album, but yeah, as you just said, eventually it would catch up to them and do some damage.
Yeah, well, have a policy like that is unsustainable. Simple as that. You know, you can't operate what is essentially a collective by having no communication and appointing somebody as a go-between for personal relationships.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm getting married in a couple weeks. I might try that with my wife. So we'll see how that works out. We'll do it part 2, and I'll let you know.
Yeah, yeah. I could just imagine that on the honeymoon. Yeah, I could just imagine that on your honeymoon. Yeah. Tell my new wife I would like to sleep with her now. That's cool. Well, and congratulations, by the way.
Thank you very much. I'm excited about it.
Yeah. I'm sure you are. How long ago were all these interviews? I mean, were you able to do them as a batch, or was it, you know, bits and pieces over time? Did you meet the band, or was it Skyping?
All of the interviews took place over the phone, and they all took place a little over a year ago, last summer, while Metallica was on tour in Western Europe. I spoke with them over the phone. And I spoke with each band member twice, and I did long single conversations with Newsted and Bob Rock.
Yeah, that was my next question, because we've mentioned the band, and we've talked about the band loosely, and we've mentioned everybody but Jason so far. So how was he? Was he easy to get hold of, and how was the How was chatting with Jason?
Chatting with Jason was a fantastic experience. He's really almost like an evangelist for heavy metal. I mean, he was
Yeah.
practically shouting on the phone, and I love the passion and the avidity. It's something I wish he could inject some of that energy into American culture because right now American culture suffers from a deficit of avidity. Uh,
Don't worry. Donald Trump's going to sort all that out for you.
oh, right. Yeah, I love talking to people like you from more sophisticated parts of the planet and having to represent this laughing stock nation. But anyway, that aside, I think Jason was a little reticent to do the interview because I reached out to his publicist and with the interview request, and I didn't receive any response. And then I sent a follow up, which also went ignored. And then once I had confirmation of participation from every other member of the band, I let Newsted's publicist know and just essentially said, listen, his perspective is essential. I would really like to talk to him, and if he doesn't do it, he's going to be the only one not on the record in this book. And then I got a response almost within the hour confirming his participation. So I think he was waiting to see who else was going to go along. But all of that reticence evaporated instantly when we got on the phone. He was so passionate and, like all the members of the band, very gracious with his time and also very insightful.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a great loss to the metal community at the moment. I know he did the Newsted band, and he was all over social media and gigging and everything, and then just all of a sudden just ducked away again, and he seems to have gone back to being a bit of a recluse again, which is a shame. I mean, I hope he's working on something, but yeah, it's funny you should. So everybody that I know quite a few people who are friendly with Jason, and everybody always says, what a great guy he is and what a passionate guy he is about music and about metal. It's a shame that he's not kind of at the forefront of the scene. Like I said, I think he's a bit of a loss.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I found so interesting about speaking to him and refreshing is that at the start of the interview, he took me by surprise by asking me a series of questions about me and my work, and it's rare that interview subjects do that.
Yeah.
So that showed me that he has a very generous spirit. But yeah, he has a really insightful perspective on heavy metal. He gave me a phrase that was really useful in the book's conclusion. Heavy equals happy, and he talked about how because heavy metal has such an inseparable attachment to defiance and revolt and rebellion, that you're confronting the tragedies and traumas of life, the dread and the despair, but you're doing it in this heavy fashion that it's almost amplification of the middle finger. Heavy equals happy. And I found close connection there with the philosophy of Albert Camus. So the introduction and conclusion of this book both bring in Camus and his definition of rebellion as the violent denunciation of hypocrisy.
Right. Okay. So Jason's take, but it sounds like Jason's take on the album, was it slightly different to the others, or were they all on the same page?
They were all pretty much the same page. Kirk Hammett talked about how it's an expression of freedom and living a life in refusal of dictation. Whereas Lars Ulrich, he was more open-minded about it, I guess. He said that, if you line 20 Metallica fans up against the wall, they're all going to give you a different interpretation, and he doesn't want to prioritize or value one of those interpretations over the other, because when he himself, as a music listener or as an art collector, receives a work of art, he doesn't want the creator telling him how to receive it. He wants to have the ability to interpret as he sees fit. So
Yeah, there speaks a man who was raised in a European art house bohemian background.
Yeah, it certainly sounds like it, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, I mean, it was interesting having those conversations and getting those various perspectives. And I think another, just to switch the topic uh, quickly, to go back to our earlier conversation about Jason Newsted and so how planets aligned to give this album its sound.
Yeah,
Uh, the tragedy of Cliff Burton's death brings Jason Newsted into the band. And I think Jason Newsted, as he offered, his simpler style of playing the bass, just slapping on it, served this rock and roll influence in the Black Album much better than Cliff Burton's classical influence would have served it. So that's another ingredient essential to the tonic.
yeah, and also it would be the first album you'd actually be able to hear Jason on as well.
Right. Oh yeah, and that played a big part of our conversation. Newsted was much more gracious about that than I expected, but maybe it's because so much time has elapsed.
Yeah, definitely. Time heals all wounds.
Right.
Yeah.
But he made a fascinating point about the Justice record. He said that with its primitive production, it was really a heavy metal precursor to the Black Keys and Jack White. Just with the guitars at 200 miles per hour, it's almost like an R.L. Burnside record today. And I found that very interesting because then I went back and listened to the Justice record, and I could see what he was saying. Just guitars and drums in a basement, a little thin rat-a-tat-tat, but a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I asked Jason if he's heard this bootleg that's available, and Justice for Jason, in which somebody's turned the bass up in the mix.
Yeah.
And yeah, he told me that some teenagers who lived down the street from him brought it to him one day. And his exact words when I asked him what he thought of it was, "Giant fucking fantastical." So, that's my new favorite expression, giant fucking fantastical.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, wow. So, yeah, so he finally has justice.
Right, exactly.
Oh, dear me. That's amazing. That's amazing. So, of course, I mean, he got a couple of riffs on there, but it was still mainly the kind of the Hetfield and Ulrich bandwagon with a little bit of Kurt's riffs thrown in there as well.
Right.
Did they actually go into, or were you able to sort of find out more about the how the songs were written, as in, how they were pieced together? Were they put together any differently to the way that they used to, that they'd written before, i.e. in groups or bringing things to jam on? Was the approach any different?
It sounded like they followed the formula and stuck to the format that they had used with previous records, which is James Hetfield and Lars Ulrich do the majority of the writing. But what will happen when Kirk makes a contribution, or when Newsted makes a contribution, in the case of My Friend of Misery, it's typically on a tape. They record a riff, like Kirk recorded the Sandman riff, and Newsted recorded the bass riff for My Friend of Misery, and then Hetfield and Ulrich take that element and add all of their creativity on top of it. And that's pretty much how it works. They're the creative band leaders. The one exception to that, which I'm sure everybody knows, is Nothing Else Matters.
Yeah.
Hetfield wrote entirely by himself and really played almost all the parts on it in his hotel room, and recorded a demo of it, and never had any intention of it becoming a Metallica song, but he played it for Lars, and Lars was so flabbergasted and impressed by it that it was his insistence that made it a Metallica song.
Yeah, I mean, I think Well, it's no secret, as you've already mentioned there before. I guess Lars has probably, well, has always been sort of very progressive, and they, I don't know. There always seemed to me like with Lars, there always seemed to be a competitive edge as well, where it's like we've constantly got to be reimagining ourselves. We've constantly got to stay one step ahead of the pack, as it were. I mean, do you think that kind of fed into the Black Album at all, or was it purely they wanted to get out of the straitjacket of their own making?
I think it's a combination of both. I do think that there was some, I mean, Metallica commercial consideration. Metallica had always joked about living out a quest for world domination.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
think they knew that they could continue making records like the classic unassailable first four and have a huge following and be titans and giants of heavy metal. But there's a certain commercialism that separates Black Sabbath and Led Zeppelin, for example. And with the Black Album, they went from Black Sabbath territory to Led Zeppelin territory. I think that was part of it. I also think that uh, they had already started talking about establishing some distance from the thrash genre on Ride the Lightning with Fade to Black. So I think that there was always this desire to escape the straitjacket, as you just eloquently put it. And you even see some of that come into play with the cover art. I mean, Lars Ulrich said that he wanted to get as far the fuck away as possible as cover art with skulls and swamps and demons and everything else that some of the other big four bands were using.
yeah,
Uh, and you see it with lyrics too. James Hetfield discussed how he didn't want to write lyrics any longer about, and he never did to a large extent like Slayer or other bands, but about Satan or blood or things of that nature. He wanted to separate Metallica lyrically from
yeah.
other bands. So there was that lone wolf desire that was certainly an influence, along with this quest for world domination.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned there I mean, when you spoke to Bob Rock as well. I mean, it's a long time, obviously, since they were all in a room putting that album together and everything else. And I'd be interested to find out what it was like talking to Mr. Rock and his kind of feelings about it all those years ago. Because there was definitely, I mean, we've all seen the making of videos and stuff like that, and there's a few VH1 specials, and we all know that there was some classic sort of headbutting moments where there were clashes.
Right.
But obviously, when you're working on a project, everybody's pointing in the same direction, and if everybody's fighting, but all fighting to go in the right direction, then it's all good. But there was obviously a culture shock for Metallica dealing with Bob Rock. Was there a culture shock in reverse as well?
Yeah. There certainly was, and Rock was, to my surprise, before I get to the substance of your question, Rock was very excited and eager to discuss the Black Album.
Oh, that's
I
cool.
ass-
That's good.
I
Yeah.
ass- right. I assumed wrongfully that he might have grown tired of it by now because he's produced countless records, but he's always going to be most closely associated with the Black Album, and I thought maybe he was sick of that, but not at all. He was very excited and eager to tell the stories.
No, I thought there might be a case as well, mind you. I think I think if you'd been interviewing him about Saint Anger, it might have been a shorter interview.
Yes, I certainly wouldn't have had nearly as many questions.
Yeah, just one.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
What were you thinking?
yeah. Well, yeah. What were you thinking? And that fucking drum sound.
Right.
Yeah.
Um,
But so yeah, so he was keen to talk about it. That's awesome.
yeah. That was a wonderful surprise. But when you talk about the culture shock, I mean, uh, he was the one most vital and valuable in amplifying Jason Newsted's bass. And he also taught Newsted how to play bass in different ways, because essentially before that, Newsted was just playing the guitar part on a bass. And
Yeah.
Rock taught both Newsted and encouraged Lars to play the drums and the bass to establish the foundation to make the guitar riffs sound bigger, to push them out rather than try to mimic them. And Lars was very much influenced by Phil Rudd of AC/DC in his quest to accomplish that. But Newsted hated Rock. When Rock first walked in the room, in the words of Bob Rock, he said, "I was the new guy who worked with Loverboy and Motley Crue, so Jason thought I was a piece of shit." And Rock had to really work hard to prove himself. Same thing with Hetfield. You've got this new guy saying, "I think you can be a better singer, and I think you can be a better lyricist." And there was a big clash there at first. And then there were some specific agreements or disagreements rather, that never went Rock's way. Like, it was Bob Rock's idea to provide some orchestration on Nothing Else Matters. And he got Michael Kamen, who of course conducted the San Francisco Symphony Orchestra on S&M with Metallica,
Yeah.
to do that, to compose that music. And Bob Rock said when he first played it, he was in tears. He thought it was so beautiful. And Metallica just hated it. And that's why it's so low in the mix that you can barely hear it.
Yeah.
So, Bob Rock argued very strongly for it, but he's working for a band, and the band is Metallica, and they had veto power. But I think, as we were saying earlier, the collision of some of their different sensibilities, of some of their different beliefs and styles, led to the creative explosion of the Black Album, because oftentimes people work best under challenging conditions.
The best art comes from struggle.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, it's well, as an old manager of my old band used to say to me, sometimes it's better when the pots and pans fly.
Right.
So because if people get a chance to get off their chest what their problem is, or where they're coming from, or what that's when it's not just one person getting it off their chest, but everybody else gets to hear it. And you might find that some agree and some disagree, or some see the very same issue but see it a completely different way. And just sound cheesy and like a counselor, but it's all about communication.
Right. And then when you talk about struggle, I mean, Ernest Hemingway put it brilliantly, as he did many things. He said, "Writing is easy for me. All I do is sit down at the typewriter and bleed." And then the song on the Black Album, the closing song on the record, "The Struggle Within," is about that very thing. It started out very literal. James Hetfield was literally struggling to write the lyrics of the song, and therefore he called it "The Struggle Within," and it refers to the struggle of creativity and the struggle of artistry.
Yeah. Which obviously he was right in the middle of with that particular album, because it was a very demanding time for him as well, because he was obviously changing or learning a completely different style of writing lyrics, but a completely different way of delivering them as well. It is kind of like it's almost sort of Hetfield's album, really, isn't it?
Yeah, Dave Marsh, who is a pretty established rock and roll critic. I have mixed feelings about him, but he's Bruce Springsteen's biographer, and he makes a very interesting point that rock and roll is really a singer's medium, even though there's so much emphasis on the guitar. If you go back to the genesis of rock and roll, it was all about the singer, really. Elvis, Little Richard, Jerry Lee Lewis, Carl Perkins, and it continues to be for a very long time. And the Black Album becomes more rock and roll, and as you put it, it becomes more of a singer's medium for Metallica.
Yeah.
And James Hetfield, I'm sure people have seen this in the making of video, but the book goes into greater detail. He records the vocal parts for that record, not with headphones, but in a large room surrounded by speakers, so that it encouraged a more nuanced, melodic, and improvisational singing style. And they stopped doubling, too, to provide more nuance and melody and even soul in the voice. Hetfield became kind of a soulful shouter on this record.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a big difference. I mean, as a I was going to say singer, but as a vocalist myself, the difference between Justice and the Black Album is just night and fucking day, because you have got that soulful. I mean, that soulful kind of voice. The only person in metal at the time who had a similar kind of sort of soulful delivery would have been Jeff Tate. And you can hear on Justice, there's so much harmonizer on the vocals. Mm-hmm. You can tell that they're trying to make the vocals sound bigger than they are, whereas on the Black Album they just are.
Right, right. And that's an excellent way of putting it. And then, I don't know if this will cause all of your listeners to shut off the podcast immediately, but I actually like the Load and Reload records, and Hetfield continued to develop that singing style on those records, and there are some really dynamic vocal performances on those records as well. So you really see him grow into a singer, not just a screamer, and that is something unique in the heavy metal genre. Others have done it, as you mentioned, Jeff Tate and others, but he was a real pioneer and groundbreaker.
Absolutely. In which case, quick question, slightly off topic, but quick question. So Death Magnetic, step backwards or step forwards?
I think that it's certainly more of a step backwards, because they return to the you raise an interesting philosophical question. T.S. Eliot has that great quote about spending adulthood on a journey to get back to the place where you started. So I suppose if Death Magnetic was a record with the quality of Ride the Lightning or Master of Puppets, which I don't believe it is, although I do like the record, you could say that it was a step forward. It's a step backward in the sense that they return to their thrash style. They return to a more primitive production style. But if they continue to develop and reach that same level of energy, which is really difficult to do, we can maybe see it as a step forward. I think that's a question to be determined. We'll have to see what happens next.
Yeah, no, I agree. Because for me, I think it has a number of kind of. There's Death Magnetic reminds me of all Metallica albums. It reminds me of Injustice for All. The Day That Never Comes is kind of like one, which is no great observation. A lot of people have made that observation, but there's another Unforgiven on there, and which obviously wasn't on Justice. But I just kind of, for me, just the way the kind of the production as well, it harks back to Justice for me. I think there's quite a few parallels between those two albums, which of course, which means that we're due a Black Album next. But I don't think we'll be getting one of those.
No, I think there's some weak parts of Death Magnetic, but Broken, Beaten, and Scarred, The Day That Never Comes, All Nightmare Long, and Cyanide, those songs in sequence have a tremendous amount of energy and velocity and intensity. And that middle portion of the record is just really forceful. And I really hope that they're able to capture that kind of quality on their next record, but only sustain it throughout the entire record.
No, I agree. I think it's that's a phenomenal bunch of songs, and I've rediscovered the Unforgiven 3 recently, actually, which is which is an incredibly beautiful song, and very, very, very touching, and lyrically, probably as deep as Hetfield's gone into the relationship with, well, his ex-relationship with alcohol and his current relationship with his wife. But it's, yeah, I mean, it's all, yeah. I'm hopeful of the next album, but we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, and Kirk Hammett's guitar solo on the Unforgiven 3 is absolutely
Oh,
ferocious.
yeah, that's one of the highlights of the record right there.
Yeah, I agree.
It is. It just comes searing out of the song. It's just incredible. It reminds me. It's almost like it's like driving on a little country road, which would be the equivalent of the rest of the song, and then you come over the brow of a hill, and there's a skyscraper just looms up at you. It's
Right.
it's incredible the way that solo just takes off.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way of putting it.
It's no, I'm a big fan. So have you got? So what projects have you got planned? I mean, obviously this is something that's been a real labour of love and taken a lot of your time. Anything else planned within the world of metal, or are you is that you for now?
I would like to return to the world of metal with future projects, but right now I'm working on something about higher education in America.
Ah, right, okay.
Which is a total disaster.
I was going to say higher education in America. That would be a great idea.
So we'll see how that goes. Once I finish writing that book, I'm sure that I'll be ready to return to heavy metal because I'll want to break shit. So I'll need a soundtrack to do it, and heavy metal will be perfect for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I mean, this is presumably once you've got this book under your belt, and it being such a big project and such a big book, if you will. Hopefully that will give you a kind of a way in with other bands, and not just necessarily kind of documenting albums, but getting under the skin of a few more other bands.
Yeah, I would certainly love to do that, and I've been really immensely enjoying my conversations and my encounters with some other heavy metal journalists and writers, people like yourself. This has been a fantastic dialogue, and like DX Ferris, whose books on Slayer are second to none.
Yeah, they're awesome.
It is a great person. So yeah, I'm having a ball doing this. I loved writing the book, and I'm loving this rollout.
Oh, that's really cool. And one question I'm keen to ask is: there is a danger that when you go this far down the rabbit hole, that you see behind the curtain, you see everything working, and the magic of the Black Album is forever spoiled for you. Was there a danger of that going in? Did that happen, or did the reverse happen, and you actually found some stories in there that you weren't aware of that made it even more sacred?
In this case, it was the latter. I've fallen deeper in love with the record. Years ago, I did some writing on Bruce Springsteen, and for people who are jolted by that contrast, I wrote an essay on how I made the transition from heartland rock to heavy metal at 33sound.com. I encourage people to read it. But with Springsteen, I lost the magic. The more I found out about it, the more pedestrian and mundane it became to me. But with this record, it was really about tracing those influences and training my ear to hear those influences even more than I already did. And because I also love Aerosmith, because I also love AC/DC, because I also love Motorhead, and I also love punk rock, to see how the band brought all of those elements together in this combustible chemistry only ignited my passion for the record even more than it already had been.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool because there is always that danger that, as you found with Springsteen, that it doesn't work out like that. Um, and obviously you had chance to speak to everybody. You spoke to the band members. Well, the three existing band members from that album twice. When you went back a second time, was that to pick up? Was that to kind of dive deeper on things they said the first time, or did you now have sort of new questions that you wanted to ask based on what you'd already discussed?
It was a combination of both, and I have to say, I mean, at the risk of sounding a little precious, because I love the band and I wrote this book about them. And I don't want to sound too sycophantic, but they were very gracious with their time on the phone, and all of them volunteered at the end of the conversation to follow up with a second call. They said, if you have any more questions, or if any more questions should occur to you, please get in touch with us, and we'll be more than happy to speak again. So that was a delightful surprise, and it gave me the chance to do both of what you just enumerated. I was able to ask follow-up questions and dive deeper into some of the topics we had previously discussed, and I was able to formulate some new questions.
Was there anything that
for example, I'm sorry to
no, go for it.
The way that the second call was able to work out so well is that Hetfield and I, for example, we got riffing on his lyrics. And I was asking all kinds of questions, and he was giving very interesting and insightful answers. And I'm the kind of interviewer, I like to let a conversation develop. I'll go into it with a list of pre-planned questions, but the more conversational, typically the more fruitful. And we stayed on his lyrics for so long that I wasn't able to ask the questions I wanted to ask about his guitar riffs, and of course he's a riff master.
Yeah.
So had we not had that second conversation, it would have felt very incomplete.
Yeah, and because you're essentially interviewing two people, aren't you? You're interviewing the guitarist and you're interviewing the singer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. And was there anything? Any questions that people were not so keen to ask, or any avenues that you went down that there was roadblocks put up?
No, not really. They were all pretty open, and most of my questions were about the music and the creative process and the artistry. I didn't ask any personal questions. I mean, I did ask both Newsted and Bob Rock if they harbored any bitterness or resentment about their departure from the band, and both of them said no. Whether that was entirely sincere or not, I wasn't able to tell. But also, as we said earlier, time heals all wounds, so if there was some resentment at one point, maybe it is now dissipated.
Yeah. I mean, well, like you said, it's a long time. And you've got to be some kind of person to be able to stay mad for 20 years, 25 years.
Right. Mustaine comes to mind.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he?
Well, he's found Jesus now, so maybe he's I don't know, more merciful or something.
Yeah, he found Jesus, or did he just find an overtly Christian wife? I don't know.
Right. One of my favorite writers from your country, Christopher Hitchens. I remember once speaking about President Bush's conversion to Christianity. Another American genius in league with Trump said George Bush gave up Jack Daniels for Jesus. I certainly wouldn't make that trade.
Yeah, I think it was there. What was that? I think it's a Clement Freud quote. If I could be assured of the afterlife, I would gladly give up this one for cocaine.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
There's that old, the phrase "found Jesus." There's that old Robin Williams joke. He said that when evangelist would come to his door, he would see them coming from across the street. He would immediately take off all of his clothes, and he'd answer the door. And when they say, "Have you found Jesus?" he would say, "No, come on in. Help me look for him."
Yeah. Well, you're on very you're on great territory with me, because I've spent the last 15 years doing stand up, and Robin was my was one of my very first inspirations. So yeah, I know that joke well. And he was an utter genius, that guy.
Yeah, he was a genius and a giant, and it was a really sad loss when he took his own life.
Well, yeah, and we lost Joan Rivers at the same time, or very closely as well, and that's just two legendary comics of the old guard who come from and what by old guard I mean the guard who just didn't give a fuck. You had Joan Rivers was doing 9/11 gags on the 13th of September 2001.
Right, yeah, and that's so important. It's good for laughs, and here's some symbiosis with heavy metal, just so we're full circle.
Yeah.
The willingness to mock and laugh at authority is one of the first steps toward emancipation. And great comedians like Robin Williams and George Carlin, Joan Rivers, they're able to do it with comedy. And a great heavy metal band, they're able to do it with the force of their music and the forthrightness of their lyrics.
Yeah.
We're having fun at the expense of religion. Metallica has some great songs that are very critical of faith-based ideology, and of course Slayer has an entire
career. Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah. I mean, you look at Leper Messiah. Funnily enough, I was watching a TV program recently, last week tonight, which is the John Oliver thing, which is it's actually he used to be on Jon Stewart's Daily Show, and he's the British guy who now has his own show. And it's fantastic, absolutely brilliant. And every week they pick a subject that they're going to pull apart, whether it's American football teams threatening to pull out of cities, and so they just get money thrown at them, or whether it's the collapsing infrastructure in the States, or in one case they did a whole episode on TV evangelists.
Yeah.
And it was just like, wow, it was like, because as a young kid over here, Leper Messiah was my first introduction to the whole concept of people. I mean, religion's just not on TV over here. Still, never mind people on TV saying, "Send me money and I'm going to make you better through down your phone line or whatever." And I watched this program, and it was all about basically how the laws in the States are just exactly the same as they were 20, 30 years ago. And nothing has changed. You've still got these people on TV saying, just send me your money.
Yeah, and so many of them are transparently fraudulent. It's a shame that people are so credulous that they send the money. But there's a pastor named Steve Muncie who is not far from where I live, and I've seen him on TV talking about how in 2007 he said it's the year of seven, and the Bible stipulates that anyone who sends money will get it back sevenfold. And then he did it in 2009. It was the year of 9. And then he did it in, it's just like numbers appear all over the Bible. If you're clever enough, you could make it work.
Yeah, well, presumably each page has a number.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's another thing that that the defiant spirit of heavy metal often turns toward organized religion, and that's another great gift of the genre.
But it's also considered to be quite a conservative genre as well, though. Yes, there's protest songs and things like that, but there's never real kind of typical protest song. You don't get a protest heavy metal song. You might get something that is has a theme about something, but it's not, unlike punk or anything. It doesn't do. It's very rare that you'll find a song directly confronting a political issue or a specific issue. And I think that's where the kind of the two types of music really differ.
Yeah, that's a good point, and I think maybe in that sense, heavy metal's rebellion is more personal. Like Kirk Hammett said, it's about living a life free of dictation and almost a libertarian sense. But yeah, punk is much more political and directly addressing the state, directly addressing public policy. So yeah, that's a good distinction you make.
Yeah, no, it's always interested me because I'm being a fan of a big fan of both those particular genres, and there is obviously a lot of comparisons between thrash metal and punk, and I think there is a big crossover there as well. Mm-hmm. But funnily enough, just to go back to Metallica for a while, you mentioned earlier that Fade to Black, and this is something that I kind of wanted to mention, is that I got Ride the Lightning. It hadn't been out long when I got it, and having you got into Kill 'Em All, the difference for then getting Rain in Black, getting Ride the Lightning, and having things like Fade to Black on there and stuff, it was like, wow, it just opened up a whole new world of fucking hell. This is different. These guys are really kind of just doing their own thing.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. I had a really interesting exchange with DX Ferris. People could look that up as well, where we discussed the differences between Slayer and Metallica.
Yeah, where can people find that?
That's on 33sound.com. That's the publisher's website for the 33 1/3 series, and for the rollout of my book on Metallica, they did Metallica Week. So each day of the week there was a different post related to Metallica in the book. And I love Slayer, I love Motorhead, I love AC/DC. Three bands that have essentially followed a formula and released a different version of the same album.
Yeah.
And I love them all, and I don't say that disparagingly. But I also love a band like Metallica that's willing to explore and experiment. And sometimes it might fall on its face, but sometimes it will soar and elevate us all on its coattails. And I think that begins with Fade to Black. So it really, as Ferris and I discussed, it's a difference in philosophy. When you like a band, do you like them because they adhere closely and carefully and consistently to a certain style and accept the limitations of that style? Or do you like them because of the human element that they bring when they collaborate creatively and a willingness to ride with them on this particular journey that they're taking? And I have that willingness. I mean, James Hetfield said when I interviewed him, and it's in the book, how do you know you're not supposed to go somewhere until you get there? And I rather like that. I think that's a fine philosophy for any creative endeavor, but also the ongoing experimentation and education of life.
Absolutely. And I think you made a really good point earlier about people saying, that there's a big school of thought, but the Black Album is where Metallica sold out, etc. But as Lars has often said till he's blue in the face over the years, selling out would have been doing Justice Part 2. Selling out would have been just staying in their own little protected environment where they knew that they could the next album would be even bigger, and they'd make the next jump in size of venue, and they could literally write out the checks right now as to what's going to happen for the next few over the next couple of years after the next album. Instead they went down a route that was, hey, let's try this and see what happens.
Right, and these are intelligent men, and they're literate men. They knew what people would say, and they knew what people were saying. I mean, was selling out, collaborating with Lou Reed to make Lulu? Uh, absolutely not. I think Lars is correct. They could have made Ride the Lightning, uh, parts 6, 7, 8, and 9, and fo- honored people's expectations in that sense. Why is that considered authenticity, but experimentation is considered artificial? I think it's mixed up.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, absolutely. Look, it turns out the thing is that the Black Album, it doesn't sound to most people's ears like the sound of Risk. It
Hmm.
sounds like the sound of Safety. It sounds like the sound of, oh, hang on, this isn't the band that made Unjustice for All, but that is the Risk.
Right.
That is they're going out of the comfort zone. They're going out on a limb to try and produce something different. Because and speaking as somebody who's in a band themselves, you have to keep things interesting for you.
Hmm.
You have to be engaged and interested in what you're doing. You
Right.
can't just churn something out.
Yeah, I mean, typically when I write, and I've written books about music, but when I write the book that I want to read, and that's how I stay engaged in it. And if I'm engaged and I'm passionate and I'm energized and I'm having fun and I'm stimulated while I'm writing it, then I think there's a greater chance that all of those things will transpire for the reader when he or she sits down with the book. Whereas if I'm bored writing it, on some level that's going to express itself to the reader, and the reader's going to have a boring, mundane experience.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's like well, it's the same as I mean, as I said, I do comedy, and the only way to write comedy is you can only write what makes you laugh. You can only write
Mm.
what you think is funny. The minute you try and figure out what other people are going to laugh at, well, that's for the birds. That's going to drive you insane.
Yeah, you do what you love, and do your best with it and hope other people will like it. That's all you can do. I mean, one of my favorite authors, David Foster Wallace, once addressed this very topic, and he said, how am I supposed to sit down and write a book and try to imagine what a possible hypothetical audience will think of it when I not only finish writing the book, but when it's in bookstores 2 to 3 years from now?
Yeah,
I mean, like you said, you just drive yourself crazy doing that. So you do what you enjoy, and you try to invest the time, effort, and energy and labor necessary to do it well, and just hope for the best.
yeah, absolutely. And I think, funnily enough, this brings us right back to a point we were talking earlier as well about the overall impact that the Black Album had. It wasn't just it made a few waves in metal circles. I mean, it to this day. I mean, I when the Big Four were doing their first gigs, and when they broadcast one in cinemas around the world, and I had a friend who was going to come and see it with me and couldn't make it, and another girl came instead, and she was basically, she liked the Black Album, and that was it. And she sat through the whole Big Four in a cinema purely just waiting for this for songs from the Black Album,
Hmm.
and she was just like, Anthrax, yeah, all right, Megadeth, oh god, that singer bloke looks like he's had a stroke. Um, Slayer, yeah, I can't really find the beat. And then Metallica come on, and there's like a few tracks from the Black Album, and she's just in another world, absolutely loving it. And that's somebody who would not would not go to a metal gig or anything like that, but purely went and sat through all of that thing just because of that album. All those years later.
The Black Album is one of those records. I mean, there's I know people who hate country music, but they own a couple of Johnny Cash records.
Yeah.
Typically people who don't like jazz, like Miles Davis. The Black Album is that cultural touchstone of transcendence for the heavy metal genre.
Yeah.
And your friend is a perfect illustration of that.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is. I have this test basically, which is it's very easily done. You ask somebody what their favourite Queen song is, and if they don't have a favourite Queen song and they don't like Queen, you can pretty much decide that they don't like music. And even if they say they do, you've got news for them. They don't. And pretty much anyone can name a song off the Black Album. And
right.
across so many different ages as well.
Mm-hmm.
Because it still sounds now. Well, in fact, with the advent of so many of every album being Pro Tool to pieces these days, the Black Album, if anything, is sounding better than it ever has now.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I did another interview for this book recently, and the interviewer told me that he thinks now the Black Album has begun to sound anemic and it needs a remaster.
What a dick!
That was my exact reaction. I mean, I just thought that he was fucking insane.
Yeah.
And I tried to remain polite during the interview, but I probably shouldn't have.
No,
because I couldn't understand where he was coming from.
Not at all. It's the other way around. Everything else is becoming anemic and sounds thin next to the big, fat, fucking hulking great Black Album.
Right, this juggernaut that comes at you and just, knocks your entire house down.
Well, that thing you mentioned earlier, you crank your stereo and put My Friend of Misery on, that fucking thundering bass intro and the drums, and then everything else kicks in. Christ. Jeez, that guy's got fucking wooden ears.
Right.
That guy's got wooden ears. That is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, look, dude, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you. This has been it's been really, really it's been educational. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, thank you. This was a great experience. I really enjoyed this interview. I would love to do it again in a second if you ever have another topic that we can explore.
Oh, definitely, man. Well, look, hey, look, write some more books on metal and get your ass back on here, definitely.
All right, I'll start it today.
Cool, yeah, you do that. Yeah, tell your wife you're gonna have to cancel a honeymoon. You're gonna be busy writing a book.
All right, I'll do that.
Well, look, once again, congratulations. I hope when is it? 3 weeks you're getting married?
October 17th.
October 17th. Wow. Actually, just that's kind of spooky. What day is October the 17th?
It's a Saturday.
It is a Saturday. On that very day, I do believe that my band are going to be playing. We're playing Belfast that day. So I will try and do a shout out and do a song for you. I'm going on the road for the first time in 25 years. Dug up my old thrash band, and unfortunately the original members couldn't make it, so we rebooted it. And funnily enough, we put a Pink album out in 1990.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What's the band's name? I want to check it out.
All right, we're called Acid Rain, but the rain was spelled REIGN.
Okay.
But if you go to acidrain.co.uk, that's pretty much everything in a nutshell right there.
Spectacular. Well, I'm going to check out Acid Rain.
Cool, man. And then a 33 and a third book on the Pink album instead of the Black album, and we've got a deal.
Oh yeah, that'll be the next one.
Cool. All right, look, David, it's been an absolute pleasure. I wish you all the best with the wedding. Hope it all goes well. And look, you're welcome back anytime. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you for taking the time out to have a chat.
All right, well, thank you. Good luck, and I hope you blow Belfast's doors down.
Cool, me too. Thanks a lot, man.
Bye, Howard.
Take care. Bye bye. So there you go, folks. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. I think you can tell we both had a blast. It was, I sense DX and David coming back on the show at some point because just fascinating guys. So much knowledge and hard work and insight. Basically, all the things that I don't do, like the hard work and the research and everything. That's why I think that's why I've got such an admiration for writers and why I like doing the writers' podcasts as well. And I know you guys like listening as well because you do come back in your droves. I think it's really interesting to hear from these guys. Because all you normally get is their writing, and it's nice to hear what goes on behind and everything else, and maybe little bits and pieces and little anecdotes that don't make it to final articles or final books. And anyway, I'm rambling here. I need to do the housekeeping, and that is 333sound.com. That's the digits 3, not the word 3. 333sound.com is the official website. It's part of Bloomsbury Publishing. That's where you get the books. Well, you can go to Amazon, obviously, I'm going to be heading down there and getting the book. And as I said earlier, and just in case you missed it, you can also get David at davidmasciotra.com and facebook.com/david.masciotra. I hope I'm really not making a mess of the pronunciation of his name there. I probably should have checked with him before I did that. So Dave, if you're listening and I've made a mess of it, my apologies, mate. We'll make up for it next time. So there you go, folks. You probably noticed my voice is a little deeper, a little croakier. That's because I've done half of the Acid Rain tour dates. It's fucking amazing. But this podcast is not about me. It's about the writers and it's about their hard work. So I just wanted to explain why I might sound a little bit more sexy than normal. Okay, kids. So anyway, that's my Phil Anselmo impression. Yeah, man, everything. I just get up there, man, and give him my fucking all. There you go. That's a quick day Phil Anselmo impression there, especially for Chuck at the Mel Sox podcast, who does them much better than me. So anyway, enough babbling. Thank you very much to David for doing the podcast. That was awesome. Thank you very much to you for listening. We will be back. Service will be resumed. Normal service will be resumed. A little teaser for this month's podcast. It's going to be old school and it's going to be new school. Old school meets new school. A bit of a thrash legend. Not mainstream thrash legend, but a thrash legend nonetheless, and a new school band on, and pretty obvious who they are if you know who we've been playing with. So anyway, thank you very much to David for the awesome interview. Thank you very much to you for being awesome, for listening. That's another Bollocast. Thank you very much. No music to play you out, just pure and simple good vibes. Hope you're all well. Look forward to catching up with you again next month. Thanks a lot. Take care. Keep tuning in. Keep downloading. It's fucking awesome. Love it. Keep it metal. Keep it secret. Keep it safe.